What's up, everybody? It's Jordan, and welcome to the Sports 2 Hines Show. And in this video, I want to be doing my all-season review and season predictions for the Jacksonville Jaguars. So let's go ahead and get into it here. So last season, the Jacksonville Jaguars were 3-14, and obviously the Urban Meyer experience did not work out at all. Did not even make it a full season as a NFL head coach. In the offseason, they hired former Philadelphia Eagles head coach Doug Peterson. Doug Peterson was the head coach with the Eagles from 2016 to 2020. He was 42-37-1 with Philadelphia. He made the playoffs 3 out of those 5 years with Philadelphia. He also won a Super Bowl with the Eagles in his second season in 2017. Obviously, this past season, when you look at the Jaguars in this year, their franchise player Trevor Lawrence, he's going to be a major factor for their success. Last season, Lawrence had 12 touchdowns, 17 interceptions. His completion percentage was just below 60%. He had over 3,600 passing yards, 300 rushing yards, and 2 rushing touchdowns as well. And, I feel like something that kind of gets lost in the shuffle with all these offseason moves for Jacksonville that we'll get into later is that, last season, the 2021 draft, the Jaguars had 2 first-round picks. Lawrence, and they drafted his, teammate at Clemson, Travis Etienne. Travis Etienne did not play at all in the regular season last year due to a foot injury. But, their other running back, James Robinson, he had over 700 rushing yards. He averaged over 4.5 yards per carry, and he had 8 rushing touchdowns. And when you look at this Jacksonville team, their wide receivers were kind of an issue last season. Marvin Jones had over 70 receptions for 800 yards and 4 touchdowns. Laviska Shenault had over 60 receptions, over 600 yards. Laquan Treadwell had over 30 receptions, 400 yards, and a touchdown. They had DJ Chark, but he got injured against Cincinnati in the Thursday night game and only played 4 games last season. I feel like that kind of had a little bit to do with, their decline in play at wide receiver last year. But when you look at Jacksonville last season, they were tied for 4th in the NFL with most drops. They had the 4th most drops in the NFL last season with 25. And when you look at the offseason additions for the Jacksonville Jaguars, I feel like, they really focused on that. They don't want to have as many drops. And that's why they signed multiple, players who come in right away for Jacksonville and help this offense with Trevor Lawrence. First off, they signed Zay Jones. They signed him to a 3-year deal worth $24 million. He had 47 receptions last year and 546 yards. They also signed Evan Ingram, who used to play for the New York Giants, to a 1-year deal. He had 46 receptions, over 400 yards, and 3 touchdowns last year for New York. And they also signed wide receiver Christian Kirk. I know lots of people, talk about the signing. I think, they overpaid Kirk way too much. Christian Kirk had a career year last year. He had a career high in receptions and yards, having 77 receptions, over 950 yards, and 5 touchdowns. They signed him to a 4-year deal worth $18 million per season. And I know everybody loves to talk about, the Jacksonville Jaguars overpaid Christian Kirk way too much. I don't disagree with that, but my thing is, I am a big Bengals fan. And, before Joe Burrow came along, the Bengals had to overpay some of these players to come to Cincinnati and play for the team, a small market team who did not have much success. When you're the Jacksonville Jaguars, when you've had a number 1 pick in the NFL in the past 2 years, and you haven't really had that much success aside from your AFC Championship appearance several years ago, you're going to have to overpay some of these players for them to come to your team. So I do kind of get why the Jacksonville Jaguars kind of overpaid some of these guys. I feel like it's kind of being talked about too much. I mean, I would rather have my team be aggressive than not aggressive at all. But I feel like Christian Kirk could be really, really good for this Jaguars team this season. As we continue here, their offensive line, they signed one of the best guards in the NFL, and Brandon Sharif, to a 3-year deal worth about $50 million. Brandon Sharif is a 5-time Pro Bowler, and he was also an All-Pro back in 2020. I love this addition so much. I'm actually kind of surprised Sharif left Washington. He's played his whole career with Washington up to this point. And, part of the reason why they did that is because they lost Andrew Norwell to Washington. They also lost right guard A.J. Kane to Houston. And I know you're losing 2 offensive starters on the offensive line. But to me, I would rather have Brendan Sharif over Andrew Norwell and A.J. Kane because, like I said, Sharif is one of the best guards in the NFL, one of the best offensive linemen, honestly, in the NFL as well. And, with some of those additions in the offseason, that was kind of free agency. And when you look at the defense, some of the moves they made in defense in the offseason, this was more so really in the draft. When you look at the offseason for the Jacksonville Jaguars, they lost Miles Jack to the Pittsburgh Steelers. He had 108 tackles last year, 3 tackles for loss. They also lost linebacker Damian Wilson to Carolina. He also had over 100 tackles last year. He had an interception, 3 sacks, and 5 passes, deflections. And when you look at Jacksonville, they really helped their defense here in the draft a couple months ago in April. They drafted Trayvon Walker, first overall from Georgia. Very debatable pick. I know some people wanted Hutchinson, some people wanted Walker. But, some of these other picks here, Devin Lloyd, a terrific linebacker from Utah that drafted him in the first round, replacing the absence of Miles Jack and Damian Wilson. And they drafted Chad Muma, a linebacker from Wyoming in the 3rd round. And, sometimes when you look at teams, they don't often address 2 really, really talented players at the same position early in the draft. But that's exactly what the Jacksonville Jaguars did. And I kind of applaud them for that, and I think it's a terrific move because that kind of proves to me that they're drafting best player available. They're not drafting team needs. When you lose Damian Wilson and Miles Jack, both of those guys who had over 100 tackles last season, and you get Devin Lloyd, arguably the best linebacker available, and then Chad Muma in the 3rd round with the 70th pick overall, you didn't need linebacker, but he was the best player available, and that's what they did. That was a great selection there by the Jacksonville Jaguars, and basically tripling down on linebacker. They drafted Devin Lloyd, they drafted Chad Muma, and before the draft, they signed, I know I'm going to pronounce his name wrong, Foyesade Oluokun, a linebacker who previously played for the Atlanta Falcons. They signed him to a 3-year deal worth $28 million guaranteed, and money could be up to $47 million. Oluokun really came into absolutely nowhere last season. He had 192 tackles for Atlanta last year. So you bring in Oluokun, who led the NFL in tackles, nearly 200 tackles last year. Absolutely insane. Devin Lloyd and Chad Muma, there is hope for this defense to be really better than it was last year. And like I talked about, with some of these additions in the offseason too, when it comes to, offense with Christian Kirk, Evan Ingram, Zay Jones, Brendan Sharif, this team is better than people think it is. I really think this team is capable of maybe flirting around the playoff contention area, but it's kind of talk about here, in my opinion, the wins and losses for this Jacksonville Jaguars team. Before kind of talking about this, every single schedule, when I do for each NFL team, I always have one game that they have an upset win, and I always have an upset victory. So if you say, well, they beat this team, but they lose this team, it makes no sense. They beat this great team here, but they lose to this really sucky team here. What's the explanation on that? It happens in the NFL every single year. For instance, look at the Cincinnati Bengals. The Cincinnati Bengals defeated the Chiefs last year twice. They swept the Ravens and they swept the Steelers, but they lost to the Jets and the Bears. It makes no sense sometimes. So looking at some of these wins here for the Jacksonville Jaguars, I have them having wins against the Washington Commanders, the Houston Texans, at the Detroit Lions, at the Houston Texans. I have them upsetting the Colts, and I have them having a major upset and beating the Baltimore Ravens. The losses here, I have them losing at the Los Angeles Chargers, losing at Philadelphia, losing at Indianapolis, losing against the Giants, losing against the Broncos and Raiders, losing at the Kansas City Chiefs, losing at Tennessee, losing against the Cowboys, losing at the Jets, and losing against Tennessee. So my, prediction here, I have them 6-11. There are a couple of toss-up games here. These toss-up games, all of these I have them losing, but I could definitely see them winning any of these 3. And depending how good they are, I could see them possibly winning all 3 of these games, against the New York Giants, against the Dallas Cowboys, who are extremely overrated, and against the Jets in New York. So my record prediction for the Jacksonville Jaguars this season is 6-11. That's doubling your win total compared to last season. I think that's pretty good considering, this is a new head coach coming in. Trevor Lawrence's first year to learn a new system with Doug Peterson. I think Doug Peterson is going to do wonders for Trevor Lawrence this upcoming year. But 6-11, I don't think that's bad. My ceiling for the Jacksonville Jaguars is 9-7. Like I said, I have them 6-11 right now. But those toss-up games, I think they're 100% capable of winning any of those 3 games. I know people might say, it's crazy to have them beating the Colts and the Ravens. Okay, maybe scratch the Ravens off there and have them beat Tennessee. I think they're going to have at least 1 or 2 upset wins this season because they're a team, like I said, I think they're capable of having 7, 8, maybe 9 wins. And people really need to start talking about them as one of those more surprise teams as we head into the 2022 season. Like I said, my ceiling for them is 9-7, and my floor for them is 4-13. But my overall prediction is 6-11. Let me know what you think in the comments about the Jacksonville Jaguars offseason, how you think they will do this season. Let me know what you think the record will be this upcoming year in the 2022 season. That about does it here. I thank you all so much for watching. If you're new to the channel or you've seen my videos before, make sure to like this video and subscribe to the channel. I would greatly appreciate it, and I will see you all next time on the Sports Dude Hines Show.